Coach Alexander is not related to me. My father was Willie Alexander Curry, and he was a Georgia Bulldog. And when my young 20-year-old mom-to-be was about 10 months pregnant, and my father came home from the war, from the Fort Hood, where he was stationed at the time, so that this child could be born, I refused to show up. And so as he went back to Fort Hood, he gave her specific instructions. He said, "My name is Willie Alexander Curry. I don't like that name. If the child is a boy, do not name him after me. Do you understand?" She said, "Yes, I've got it." So the next day I showed up, and I am William Alexander Curry. And I would have loved to be named after Coach Alec, but all Tech people think that. But that doesn't change the fact that I owe everything I've got to Georgia Tech. I was at an incredible meeting in Toronto in early December. It was a meeting whereby we were to discern depth and breadth of organizational thought, and we're to do it through the media of luminaries, of which, believe it or not, I was one. We had college professors there and one old football coach. I was so impressed at the depth of the conversation and how we got to important issues for every human being on the face of the earth. But it began with the founder of the organization, who looked everybody in the eye in that small room to begin the morning and asked this question: what do you love? What do you love? And how can we use that to do what we must do with our company, with our personal lives, with our family lives, with our obligations to society, with our political lives? It struck me like a thunderbolt. I love Carolyn Curry with all my heart. She is the light of my life. I told my dad in the 6th grade I was going to marry Carolyn Newton. Everybody in College Park knew she was the most beautiful girl in the world and the smartest kid in College Park. So he said, "That is the best idea you've ever had." "Is Carolyn aware of your plan?" I said, "No, she's taller than me. She won't speak to me." That was a policy she continued for 6 years. But I am incredibly persistent. I was supposed to go to Georgia. My dad was born on the Georgia campus, graduated from the university. But our junior year, I got out a map. I was very clever, and I discerned that Athens was not the closest campus to Agnes Scott College. And guess who was going to be at Agnes Scott College? So I was incredibly persistent. And last December 15th, Carolyn and I celebrated our 54th wedding anniversary. So I love her with all my heart, but I love you with all my heart. And there's so many of you out here that I've watched and admired and loved, but there are a couple who played their guts out every single play for Georgia Tech. And I just sat across from Justin. And Justin, if I could watch you play 20 more years, man, I would show up every Saturday to watch you play. And what can I say about Paul Johnson's play calling? I love the one where we got to throw back to the quarterback fake and then run the ball or dive right up the middle. I like the way you came up with that, Coach. But seriously, what Paul said after the game is that we put the ball in the hands of a playmaker who could look and see whether or not it would be there. And if it were not there, don't try it. Do something else. Make a play. And that's the Georgia Tech spirit. The other guy I would like to recognize tonight was a linebacker when I was an assistant. I didn't get to coach him, but I watched him play his heart out week after week after week. Lucius Sanford, would you stand up, please? You want to see a great football player? Pittsburgh won the national championship that year, and they came down here and beat us handily. They had a back named Tony Dorsett, who had 27 carries for 103 yards. That was about 1/3 of his normal production. When he retired and was named into the NFL Hall of Fame, they asked him, who hit you the hardest in your whole career? He said, the hardest I was ever hit was by Lucius Sanford at Georgia Tech. Lucius had about 25 tackles. So I sure love you, Lucius. I love you, Bud Peterson, for what it means to be the president of Georgia Tech. Nobody can imagine how hard that is unless you have to do it. I love Homer Rice. I love Jack Thompson like my big brother. When we were 1-9-1 my first year, that was hard. Todd was there. Why are you smiling? I was going to be seen as the guy that took Georgia Tech football down the tube, so I would disappear into Thompson's office, and he was my therapist. And I'm not sure he'd have made a living at that, but he was a wonderful mentor and helped me to maneuver some of the most difficult days of my life and of our program. I had a team meeting after that 1-9-1 record, and I announced to the team, we will never go 1-9-1 again. Do you understand? Does everybody understand that? Yes, sir, we got it. The next year we went 1-10. Ellis Gardner, one of our brilliant civil engineering offensive tackles, was with me many years later. He said, do you remember what you said to the team after that? I said, I don't remember anything I said during those days. He said, you called another team meeting and you said, let me be more specific. There are a lot of you people in this room and some people that I wish could be here, Taz Anderson and Kim King, who helped us through those very difficult and demanding days, and I'm eternally grateful. And Jack, I'll never be able to thank you adequately, and neither will Georgia Tech, as long as we understand what you have done. I want to thank Gary Lanier, Amy Nash, for helping us negotiate the details of putting together an opportunity to participate in this incredible program. And I want to thank Todd Stansberry. Thank you for coming back. And Karen, thank you for allowing him to come back. I had no intention of playing football. I had two goals. I already told you one of them. I was going to marry Carolyn Newton. I was going to pitch for the New York Yankees. I didn't watch football. I didn't care about football. If I could stand 60 feet 6 inches from you and throw something at you, why would I want to run into you and risk injuring my little puffy body? But I got stuck because we had a dominating high school coach who sort of cajoled me into coming out there. And it was the worst thing that I'd ever done in my life. There was screaming and whistles blowing and people smashing into each other. No air conditioning. You could smell the locker room from 2 blocks away. Just the cultures that were developed there. The CDC could have done years of study. It was a nightmare. And they're smashing us in the face, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to do what I normally do. I'm going to quit. And then I realized I had a problem about the quitting thing, you see, because my father lived at our house. I was stuck. A fate worse than death. Short, fat, lazy Bill Curry. And it got worse before it got better. The assistant coach took us aside one day and said, we're going to assign positions. Well, they assigned all the good positions to all the good players, the better athletes. So Tommy got to be the quarterback. And finally, there were only 11 new guys. So there were 10 positions assigned and only 1 position left. And it's the position nobody wanted to play. And there was only 1 player left, the short, fat, future New York Yankee, standing over there picking my nose. I didn't care what they did with me. Coach Shattuck said a brilliant thing. He said, Bill, I guess you're going to be the center. There was nobody lined up there. I said, well, no kidding, Shaddix. That's not actually what I thought, but there are women here. So I walked over to center. Then he said another brilliant thing. Well, I guess you're going to have to learn to hike that ball. And I thought, no kidding, Shaddix. So let's think about this. 13 pounds per square inch, a really hard oblate spheroid. And you want me to take that and pull it where? Right there. Hard. And Tommy Fields is going to put his hands where? Coach, this is a very complex matrix we're contemplating here. What if he moves his hands early? Worst thing that could have happened to short, fat, lazy Bill Curry, right? Wrong. 4 years later, a wonderful man named Bobby Dodd took a chance on me. My high school counselor called me in and said, Bill, I understand you're considering Georgia Tech. And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, don't. I said, don't what? She said, don't consider Georgia Tech. And I said, why? She said, Bill, they take chemistry and physics. They have national merit scholars. You wouldn't survive 2 semesters at Georgia Tech. Bill, you're not a stupid boy, but you have frolicked all the way through high school. So I thanked her and went down to the library and looked up the word frolic. She was right. So I show up at Georgia Tech, sure enough, have no business being here. National merit scholars here and there. And they put me in chemistry at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had no idea what Dr. A.C. Tharpe was saying. He looked like a refugee from the House of Lords in London. He had the little mustache and the cane, and I couldn't understand a thing he said. And I thought, I'm wasting his time and mine, so I'll sleep in. Coach Dodd had told us, you will go to class. And I thought he was probably kidding about that. They couldn't catch me anyhow. They had 100 kids in the section. What are they going to do? So I just slept in one time. The next day, my name's on the bulletin board. Bill Curry, report to Grant Field, Wednesday morning, 5:30 a.m. In your running gear. Coach Dick Inman was so happy to see me in the dark. As I ran up and down the west stands, about the 50th time I ran up and down through my sobs and my self-pity and my tears, I decided that chemistry at 8 o'clock in the morning was a wonderful pursuit. And that's a cute little story. And parents love it especially. But here's what matters. I never cut another class because my football coach loved me too much to allow me to self-destruct when I could not see my own potential. I learned that if you sit on the front row and take notes and actually read the notes before the quiz, it's amazing what you might be able to accomplish. I had never tried that. I was taught how to be a student by our tutors, by the incredible professors, and I could name so many of them, but I remember Dr. Phil Adler particularly. I walk in, and naturally I get in the back of the room as far away from him as I can get, and he said, Mr. Curry, Mr. Curry, are you here? Yes, sir, I'm here. Are you a football player? Oh, yeah. We're going to have another one of these hostile things. He said, come here. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to come here, sit right here every day in my class and write down every word I say. I can go anywhere now. I could go to Congress and write, no, not Congress. I don't want to go there. I could go almost anywhere and I could go to a Paul Johnson meeting. I can write down everything that he says because I learned how to take notes and how to think from Phil Adler and all the other professors on the Hill that forced us to drag out of ourselves that which we had not been willing to give before. And on the football field, God bless people like John Robert Bell. I went to one of my coaches in my 4th year, and I said, Coach, maybe I'm not trying hard enough. He said, no, you try hard. I said, well, maybe I'm not studying my plays. He said, no, you've got your assignments down well. I said, well, why am I 4th string? Why have I never gotten to play? He said, because you're not good enough. Because you don't move your feet well enough, and you're a nice young man, and get your education, help us recruit, but you're not going to play, and you'll never play, and I'm sorry. Now, he wasn't trying to be cruel. He was doing his job. The same time, John Robert Bell, who must have overheard the conversation, came to my locker, and he said, Bill, would you like to go down to Rose Bowl Field with me early before practice and let us work on your footwork? Because I know you can play. Yes, sir. Yeah, we did that. So when I'm playing in my 4th World Championship game, who do you think I'm thinking about? Thinking about Bobby Dodd, John Robert Bell, Phil Adler. I'm thinking about the people that believed in me before I deserved it, who believed in me in such a way that it forced me to find reservoirs within that I never dreamed were there. I learned to hike the ball to Tommy Fields, and 4 years later, I learned to hike that ball to Billy Lothridge, our Heisman Trophy candidate. And at the end of my college career in the Senior Bowl, I learned to hike that ball to Joe Willie Namath. And a few months later, I learned to hike that ball to Roger Staubach and John Hewitt and Bob Timberlake and Craig Morton. And the week after that, I learned to hike that ball to Bart Starr and Zeke Bratkowski. And 3 years after that, I learned to hike that ball to Johnny Unitas and Earl Morrall. And in various games and on various teams, I learned to hike that ball to Bob Greasy and Dan Pastorini and James Harris and Darryl LaMonica and Len Dawson, the greatest players, the greatest leaders in the history of our sport up until that time. And I had the privilege of being in the huddle with them. The only position in all of sport that would have allowed me to have a career was offensive center. So when you have the combination of people who love you, and when you have the greatest institution in the world to train your mind and to force you into a discipline that you would otherwise have never attempted, then you can't do anything but your best. You have no choice. And that's what Georgia Tech means to me. And I love Georgia Tech with all my heart. And I hope you do as well. Now, we got a special challenge at this stage and this time in our country. There are people eating together tonight who are being told, you're not supposed to be together. You don't belong here. You need to go back to your country or back to whatever because of the color of your skin or because of your religion. That's what our country is saying to our citizens now. And those of us that do celebrate the diversity. Football, by the way, is the only sport in which every player needs every teammate on every play just to survive. That's why it makes sense to play our sport. That's why it means a lot to step in that huddle. It doesn't matter whether we like each other, we look the same. It matters that we're in this together, and neither one of us can succeed without the other. Well, the United States is structured precisely the same, and we're at risk. So brilliant people like the people in this room can make such a difference, and I beg you to consider doing that, whatever that means to you. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care where you come from or what your circumstances are. If you're a citizen of the United States or if you're not a citizen but you're living here, we all have an obligation to reach out. Each of us has a gift that nobody else has. There's a 50-cent word for it. I worked at Baylor School in Chattanooga for a couple of years, and as you leave the premises, etched in stone is 12 letters, 5 syllables, 1 word from the Latin, magna nimitas. Say it with me, halfway through, magna nimitas. Now all together, magna nimitas, 12 letters, 5 syllables, 1 word. It means greatness of spirit, and you have it. You have greatness of spirit, and your greatness of spirit is different than mine. Each of us, if we were to do fingerprints of the roughly 7 billion people on the face of the earth tonight, take a look at your hands and realize this. You already know this. You're scientists. There's not another set like that. There's never been another set of fingerprints like that. There's nobody else like you. You have a gift that nobody else has. And what we need in our country right now is for all of us to come together with our gifts and learn to listen to each other and learn to think just the way you were forced when you walked up that hill on the days you didn't think you could take it another minute and sitting in that class and fighting for your life. If we will do that as a country and listen to each other, then we'll not only change our circumstances here and do a great job with our scholarships, we'll change this country. So I'm going to ask you to do a little, I'm a youth worker, so bear with me, and do one youth worker thing. We're not going to sing Kumbaya, I promise. But I want you to join hands. I want you to join hands, and this works better if you don't particularly like the person sitting next to you. If they look different from you, if they got different pigmentation, it really works a lot better that way, because that's what America is. And I want to say this to you tonight. It's a scientific fact. None of us understands it. Only God understands it. But we know it's true because we had a bunch of scientists in this room. And it is this. When we join hands, when we cross those barriers, when we link up, and we overcome all our differences, our capacity to do good and do well and to do what we are supposed to do in this culture does not increase arithmetically. It does not increase geometrically. It increases exponentially. And it does that instantly. So then when that happens, we don't just change Georgia Tech or Atlanta. We change the world. God bless you, Georgia Tech. I love you, each one of you. Thank you so much.